Hello and welcome to Greeting Star. Today I've got a thank you card, Christmas thank you card, and I'm going to be using my Spectrum Noir alcohol markers and paper. And this is an adorable stamp set by Wild Rose Studios with those little penguins there. So I'm going to take this 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and trim it down with my SureCut paper trimmer here. This is a Fisker's paper trimmer. I'm just using the measurement guides to cut it in half. And then I'm going to turn this piece around and cut it in half as well. Now this paper trimmer is awesome because it has that little wire guide that you can see that I just showed you with my finger there. And so it's awesome for cutting, like if you have paper that's hanging over the edge that you need to trim, that wire will show you exactly where you need to cut. Now we're also going to be using that Hero Art Stamp and Cut set. I'm going to cut out the word thanks using that die cut there. Now here I wanted to leave a little bit of a border around my paper in case I decided to mat it, so I would need to trim it again if I do decide to do that. So I'm using some Memento Tuxedo Black ink to stamp this stamp on my paper, and I'm also using this We Are Memory Keepers Precision Press stamping tool. I haven't used the other ones on the market, but I really love that stamping tool. My stamping comes out perfect almost every time. Well, pretty much 100% of the time. Now if I use an acrylic block, that's going to probably 75 to 80% of the time it'll come out right. So I'm just drying this ink here, making sure it's completely dry before I use my alcohol markers. And I'm going to start out with the Spectrum Noir. I believe it's the GB1 and GB2 to color these music sheets. So I'm just going in with a GB1 and coloring the whole thing. I like to put down my lightest color first and then put my dark color over that and then go back over it with a light color to blend it. So that's what I'm going to do. I don't have any kind of coloring certification or anything, but I have spent lots of time coloring and I really enjoy doing it. So, and that's my preferred method. And I think everybody kind of has their own way of doing it, but this is the way I like to do it. And this is a small stamp, so the spaces are kind of tiny, so you have to be careful. I didn't use, that's why I only use like 2 colors instead of 3 to blend it. But I think it's a lot of fun, the coloring. I just love when you put the shading in, the images just come alive. They just pop out, turns a 2D image into more of a 3-dimensional image, and I really love that. I think it's magical. So anyway, here you can see I'm just adding some shading to the bottom left and then the corners. So my light source would be kind of coming down from the top right. So you can kind of see here the shading gives that 3D effect with the light source. And now I'm going to color the little feet with OR1 and OR2. And the feet obviously are even smaller than the music sheets. So I'm not laying down a whole bunch of color. I know that it's important to saturate your paper when you're using alcohol ink markers, but the spaces are so small, if I really saturate it, then it would bleed. So I'm trying not to lay down too much. Sorry about my head getting in the way here. But I'm just adding just a teeny tiny touch of the darker OR2 and then going back with the OR1 to blend it. And these two colors really blend well together. That's the interesting thing about the Spectrum Noir markers is you might have, a series of colors like the OR1, then the 2, then the 3, then the 4, but sometimes you have a cold color right next to a warm color and they don't necessarily always mix really well. So you kind of have to play around and see what you're going to get, but I do like the OR1 and OR2. Those go well together. And next I'm going to color the little penguins black, and I'm using IG 5 and 6 and then 8 to blend. And I did decide to use 3 colors there, but I think the reason was because I didn't like the darkness. It wasn't dark enough. I started out with too light of a color, so that's why I think I went to the IG8 and then blended with the IG6. So you'll see that in a moment. And again, they're really tiny spaces, so it's difficult to really get that 3D effect. But I tried, so we'll see how that turns out. I'm just trying to, like I said, lay down a little bit of color and not saturate the paper too much, because I do not want it bleeding into that yellow on my music sheets, or the golden brown, whatever they call that, GB 1 and 2. So I end up using I started with the IG5, tried to lay down some shading with the IG6, but it wasn't dark enough, so I went ahead and went to the IG8. So you'll see later on that I lay down a whole layer of IG6 and then try shading with the IG8. Now I'm going to just touch up those little small areas here, try to get it darker, which you'll see in a moment. And then I'm going to come in and color the beaks with the OR 1 and 2 again. And on that first little guy there to the left, he has a little bit of an open beak, so I'm going to use a DR1 for his tongue. And just put a little touch of that down. And then I'm going to come over to their hats, and I'm going to use DR1, or actually 3, 5, and 6. And then I decide that I want to add a little bit more shading. That 6 isn't dark enough, so I'm going to come in with a 7 and then try to blend it out, because that 7 is a lot darker. It almost looks black, but it's kind of a cool contrast with that lighter color. And I really like that DR3. It's a real bright red that I laid down first. So that's, it just looks real Christmassy. It's a perfect Christmas red. So I used that, and then wanted to add some shading to the hats where right at the brim, and then also on that third one, the little penguin has some little wrinkles in the hat. So I added some shading to that. I think it turned out really nice. I like the look of that red. Probably I love doing Santa's hat too, because it's just so beautiful with those two different red colors. And when I'm done with the hats, I'm going to go ahead and touch up that penguin again. I wanted to come back in with that darker gray color, the IG 6 and 8, to go ahead and just make them a little bit darker. I just wasn't happy after it dried before, so I came back in and tried again. And now I'm going to color the scarf on this third little penguin with JG 5 and 6. So I laid down the 5 first, came in with the 6 and put in my shading, and then blended it with the 5 again. And now this last scarf, I'm doing the same kind of routine with the DR3, 5, and 7. And I think I came in with a 3 to try to blend that 7, and it just wasn't working. I think I meant to grab the 6, but I grabbed the 3, so I came back in with the 6 to blend it all. But I was happy with the result of their hats at the end. I really like the hats, I think, better than the way their bodies turned out. So now I'm using this snow marker by Uchida, and the thing about it is you do have to kind of pump it to prime it to get that stuff to come out. And the tip is a pretty bold tip, so I decided to use a paintbrush to lay down some of the little drops of snow on their hat. And I had to switch paintbrushes here because the first one, the bristles weren't even, so I switched paintbrushes. And then I'm depending on, I want different sizes of snow on their hats, so I'm trying to the first dot I'll lay down, and then I won't re-wet my brush. I'll just touch it again to a different area on their hat. And this snow marker is neat, but in order for it to puff up, it's kind of like puff paint, you have to use a heat gun to make it pop. And it's really cool. So I'm going to try to show you here. You can kind of see how you get a 3D effect. You see right there? Those little snow buttons just pop right up. And now I'm going to color the sky behind them, and I'm using a true blue color. I use the true blue 8, and then I come back in with a 9 to add some shading. And I'm starting with the end of the marker, that's the tip, the bullet type nib. And then I'll come back in with the other end of the marker to color that bigger space. I just want to, as I'm going right around the penguins, I'm using that because I have more control. But if you have a big area to color, that's one of the great things about the Spectrum Noir markers is the other end is a really big chisel tip. And so you can use that to color those big areas, and it doesn't wear that little nib down. But that little nib is perfect to get in those small spaces. So here I'm just going in between the penguin where the sky would peek through, and laying down a little bit on the very bottom there. And I'm going to, here's the darker color, I'm trying to add that shading right around their heads and bodies to make them kind of stand out and be a little bit apart from the sky. So there's a little bit of distance I'm trying to create there. Now here's where I'm using that bigger nib to color, add in some more of that color and really saturate the paper there. And then do some blending. And I'm using the heat gun to make sure it's dry because I want to come back in with my blender and try to lift some of that blue away to make it look like little snowdrops are falling here. And I do decide to come back in with that same snow marker from Uchida and put in some of those snowdrops. And I think it looks fantastic. And I'm also going to lay down a layer of snow at the bottom of their feet with this Uchida marker. And I'm just going direct to paper with it because I do want a thick line this time. And as I'm laying it down, you'll see that I get a few air bubbles, so I just use a paper clip to try to pop those. And then again, you have to bring in your heat gun to dry it. I'm on second thought, I may have waited a little bit to let it dry a little bit on its own and then come in with heat gun, because there in the middle, I leave the heat gun on it a little too long and it gets kind of dark. But no big deal. I think it looks fine anyway. So now I'm going to come back with that paintbrush to add those little dots of snow, and use my heat gun on them to make them pop up. That snow marker is so cool. I love it. And you can kind of see those little pop-up snowballs there. And then I'm going to trim this down a little bit because I do decide that I want to mat it. So I'm just taking 1/4 of an inch off of all sides. And then I'm going to mat it with a blue mat. And I'm going to adhere it to a red card. So we have red and blue for Christmas. I think that red and blue are beautiful colors. They go quite well together. So I didn't have a color that matched the blue that I used for the sky. So I'm just using my marker, and I'm using this thick chisel tip end to color the edges of this paper, and it's going to be my mat. That's kind of the nice thing about having these alcohol markers too, is you can, it doesn't matter what colors of paper you might have on hand, you can always take a white sheet and color it the color that you need. It's just making sure it's dry here with my heat gun before I adhere the front panel to it. And then once I put that front panel, I'm going to add that to my card. I love the contrast of that blue and that red. I think it's so pretty. I did test it with a darker red card base and didn't really like that. And these are those pre-cut and folded cards that have a sort of a textured surface. And I got those at Michael's this Christmas. They were on sale. a pack of 80, and it came with envelopes too, so that always makes it great when you don't have to make your own envelopes. I do have a scoring board though, so I can make my own envelopes if I want to. But during the Christmas rush, it's always nice to just have something you can grab. So I'm going to just rub off that excess adhesive that I always seem to get out of the edges of my card. So anyway, I'm going to adhere the whole thing to the front panel of my card now. I always like to put that X there to make sure that it sticks well to my card base. I'm just aligning this so I get a 1/4 of an inch of a border of red around the whole thing. And again, cleaning up any excessive adhesive. Trying to use an eraser to do it, but I just go back to my finger and my nail and get that all cleaned up and nice and neat. And now I'm going to use another white piece of paper to color the true blue, and I'm going to cut out the word thanks out of this blue paper that I'm making here. And the thanks die is from that Hero Arts Stamp and Cut set, the thanks one. And just going to cut that out using my Cuttlebug off screen. You can see here that I used some shiny silver washi tape that I had left over from Christmas to keep that die cut down on my paper. And this is a really cool tool from We Are Memory Keepers that helps you remove your die cut from your die, and it really comes in handy when you have these little intricate dies. So I'm just going to adhere this to my paper using Elmer's this like pen glue. It's really a cool little tool to have. It's like a ballpoint pen at the end, and the glue comes out. You just have to remember to kind of prime it on a piece of scratch paper at the beginning to make it come out. But then you just do that, and it dries clear, so that helps because there's always some kind of seepage. So once I have this lined down the way I want, I'm going to get a piece of paper to lay over it and rub. Hopefully any glue that seeps out will be absorbed by that top scratch paper. Now I'm going to write the words snow much. I wanted the card to say thanks snow much. Haha. And you can see that I wrote it here and I forgot to write snow. I just wrote so much. My brain took over and didn't let me write snow. So I'm using these markers here. These are, I've had these for years and years since my son was first born. And they're just the Zig memory system. I used them for scrapbooking before I started making cards. But anyway, I cut out this snow much, and I'm going to use some correction tape on the so much that I wrote because part of it was sticking out. And then I'm just going to adhere this little piece here to the bottom. I thought that was funny. Thanks snow much. So you can send this to somebody who got you a gift for Christmas. Or if you have a winter birthday, you can send a thank you card. So there it is, and you can see I did decide to add some silver snowflakes to it just to make it a little more interesting. I think it turned out nice. And I thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed watching me make this card. I had a lot of fun making it. And as always, you can visit me on my blog at greetingstar.org or check out my ebook at amazon.com/author greetingstar. And you can see my book on Amazon is called Illustrated Card Making for Beginners. It is a digital download. So if you have a Kindle e-reader or Fire Touch or anything like that, you can download it and read it. It makes a great gift and it has lots of great information. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.